Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Steel Forest Welding and Forge. Today, I'm going to take you through my Evolution chop saw setup. So first off, I want to apologize for any background noise you might hear. I'm not exactly in a professional studio setup, and I've got a lot of neighbors that like to work in their garages and backyards, which is why I picked to live where I do. I'm going to do my best to walk you through my setup here. It's going to be a little bit difficult for me to kind of hold the camera and show everything that I want to show, but I'm going to do my best. So the first thing I want to mention is when I bought this saw, I also bought a mobile tool cart. I highly recommend getting one of these guys. This is by Bora. I can't remember the exact name model of it. The PM1000 base. Now the nice thing about this base is that these two wheels here have an adjustable height to them. So I can move this thing around freely, and these are two swivel wheels. Then when I decide I want to put my saw out and do some cutting, I can move these handles or stops down like so, twist these legs, and now this tool base doesn't move. Very secure setup. So it makes it nice and mobile, and I can just cut what I want, tuck it away at the end of the day, and still pull our cars into the garage. For the next component of this setup, I also bought a tool stand. I got this guy from Menards. I believe it's the brand Tool Shop. Yes, it is. Normally I'm not a big Tool Shop brand fan, but this tool base in particular is actually pretty nice. I believe these are, looks like maybe 14 gauge sheet metal legs here and base, and overall it's a fairly solid base. It does have a little bit of twist to it, but it's not bad. Especially since I put this wooden shelf on, took a lot of that kind of twisting play out of it, and now it's pretty solid. This top right here, this is actually some angle iron from an old bed frame and some plywood on top. And the plywood is just like anchored the plywood down to the stand, and then anchored this angle iron, this metal frame around that wood. And that is the top of my setup. Now, one of the nice advantages, and also in a way disadvantages, of this particular saw is that this is what you would call a low RPM saw. This saw doesn't use a carbon cutoff wheel like the high RPM ones do. So this guy doesn't produce many sparks. It does make a few, especially when you're cutting some beefy tubing, but overall virtually no sparks, which makes it ideal for a garage setup like this. I don't want to be blowing a bunch of sparks all over the place, and I don't want to have to fireproof my entire garage. That's why I opted for this model saw. The downside to that, though, is it does create a lot of debris, and the chips that it makes are fairly large and they are sharp. We have a new rule now in my garage that you cannot walk into my garage with bare feet anymore, and when you go into the house, you have to take your shoes off. There's always a chance you're going to get some of those metal curls stuck into your shoes, and then you get in the carpet and your kid walks on them and someone gets an infection in their foot. It's just nasty. So got to make sure you wear shoes around a saw setup like this, or I mean this style saw. So in order to cut down on the amount of debris that it makes, I made this catch right here. So this catch setup catches probably, I'd say, 80% of the chips. I still get some on the floor, but nowhere near as the amount that I used to. I'm going to go ahead and walk you kind of through this setup that I have for catching the chips. All right, I'm going to go ahead and walk you guys through the setup that I have for catching the debris made on this saw. It's going to be a little difficult for me to hold the camera and also walk you through it, but I think you guys will get the general idea. So the way this is designed is that the debris is created by the saw, and most of it flies into this catch and off of this panel here. It goes down through a tube, down into a pail. And that is where most of the chips go. Now, this saw is also designed to cut on a 45. And the problem I knew I would run into is this door would get in the way. So I put this door on a hinge. So now, when you have to cut a piece at a 45-degree angle, you have some clearance here. And then when you're done, you can just close the door again and get optimal amount of chips caught into this chute. Now, for a while there, I thought about cutting out a section here just so I'd always have this door open, but then I realized, again, I would be kind of working against myself. Most of the chips come down in this direction, and that's where that slot would have been cut. So I just decided to go ahead and just put that door on a hinge. Now, this saw also has a built-in tray for catching debris, and that tray does need to be emptied. So what I did is I made a second hinge, or second door here. Lift this up, you can see right there is where you need to open that tray and take it out. So this allows me access to that tray. That is the basics for the, I don't even want to call that fancy thing, chipper catcher. Okay, that sounds good. Now I'm going to go ahead and walk you guys through the homemade stop that I made for cutting. So here's the walkthrough on the stop that I designed for this saw. This was the biggest problem I encountered with this saw that I didn't really think about until after I'd gotten it home and made a few cuts. Now, I bought this to actually work in a small production setting. I have my own business, I take orders from clients, and I have a couple of items that I make on the regular. For example, my rocket stoves. A lot of those require very similar cuts at similar lengths. For example, the standoffs on the top of the stove that you set your pans on, those are all 2 inches long. So if I have an order for, let's say, 5 stoves, there's 4 of those standoffs on each stove, that's 20 parts. That would be 20 parts I would have to measure out and cut by hand. I know that this is going to be a problem in the future, so I had to think of some kind of stop for this saw. Now, this saw is unique in one way, that this cutting blade does not swivel. Unlike your typical like wood miter saw or yes, a wood miter saw, this actually swivels and your stops do not move. However, for a metal chop saw, including usually the carbon wheel setup, the fence is what moves, not the saw. So if you look here, we loosen this handle and this fence moves, and that's how we cut a 45. So this presents a unique problem. How do you make a stop on a tool that has a blade that's fixed, that doesn't rotate? Typically, like on a bandsaw, for example, the blade rotates, so the stop is always in the same place. Well, this is what I came up with. On the bottom of this saw, or the stop, there is a bolt. This bolt I can loosen, tighten, and that goes through this wooden tabletop through another metal plate that I have underneath this saw that is anchored to this wooden shelf that has a nut welded onto it. I'll go ahead and show you that setup right now really quick so you guys can get a better understanding of what I mean. So here's the stop, and if you look right here, I have a setup and a standoff. So I can loosen this, and then this entire unit swivels. So this is how I can adjust this, cut at a 45-degree angle, or just at a stop at a 45-degree angle. So for those of you that may decide to build a setup similar to this in your own shop, if you purchase this saw, I'm going to walk you through really quick how I managed to build this setup. So all I did is I set this fence at a 90-degree angle, laid a piece of steel across it, like so, gave it a clamp down, and I marked parallel to this bar where it crosses across this table. Then I did the same thing for the 45. So 45, clamp it down, and then again marked where it intersects this table frame. After I had those two marks, I ran a straight edge across those marks and marked on the tabletop where those two lines intersected. That point was my swivel point. I knew that is where I wanted to drill a hole to put the bolt holding this stop setup, and where to put that plate with that welded nut onto it. This is what allows me to swivel this and stay in parallel with any part that I may put on the saw to cut. Now, when I built this setup originally, I hadn't really thought far enough into the future for what I would need for a good setup. So for anyone who may be deciding to do something like this at home, here's one thing I would recommend. Instead of putting the saw in the center of your frame or table, whatever, I would actually recommend moving it almost entirely over to the left side. This will allow you to make a catcher that's a little bit bigger, and also I found out that roughly where this unit swivels is close to where this handle is. Now it's not precise, so mind you, the swivel is about right here and the handle is right here. That's just a good way to kind of judge where it's going to roughly be. So keep that in mind for your own setup. So now I'm going to show you how this stop works really quick. So we'll take a piece of steel. Let's say I already have this measured. Throw it on here. Find my mark. Bring my saw down. Say, okay, there's where I need to cut. You clamp it down. You take this stop, and this stop, all it is 2 pieces of tubing, one that fits inside the other one. I drilled a hole and welded a nut onto this larger tube and put a knob on here that's adjustable. So you move this up, all you do is touch your part, clamp it down, make sure your part clamps doesn't crank off to the side and adjust where it's sitting. So now I have a stop. So what I can do, I can come down, cut, unclamp, slide it down. Clamp, cut, unclamp, slide it down. Clamp, cut, unclamp, slide it down. I can cut multiple parts without having to stop to measure. Anyone in a production shop knows exactly what I'm talking about, that a setup like this is a huge time saver, and it dramatically increases your production. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you could like this video or even subscribe to my channel, I would really appreciate it. Share me on Facebook, all that good stuff. If you guys have any questions about this saw or metal fabrication or this setup, please feel free to send me a comment down below. I love interacting with other people and answering questions about metalworking in general. In the future, we will have some more hand forging and blacksmithing how-to videos coming up, and I got a new forge coming. So we'll be doing some forge welding videos, which I have never done before. So make it or break it, I'll be videoing my first attempt at forge welding. We'll see how it goes. If it goes terrible, it'll go up on YouTube. If it goes great, it's still going up on YouTube. And so I'm looking forward to having fun with you guys, giving that a go. Have a good rest of your day.